An unprecedented fiery confrontation has just erupted between two powerful women. It all began when Queen Camilla was caught red-handed, ruthlessly psychologically abusing young Prince Louis right on the balcony, insulting the Middleton bloodline and crushing a bouquet of red roses under the child's feet. Showing absolutely no regard for the royal throne, grandmother Carole Middleton flew into a rage, shouting directly into the Queen's face to shield her grandson and gathering the crushed petals as hard evidence of the emotional abuse. Immediately, Prince William ordered a strict 20-meter security barrier, declaring Camilla completely isolated from his children. What will King Charles III do, caught between his envious wife and the family of his only son Will? This fierce counterattack, backed by ironclad evidence from the maternal side, permanently strip Camilla of her power in the palace, casting her into brutal isolation. The dark truth behind the doors of Windsor is about to be exposed. The atmosphere in the grand dining room at Windsor Castle was so suffocating that one could hear the faint breathing of the servants standing solemnly along the ancient stone walls. The midday sun streamed through the large stained glass windows, casting light onto the centuries-old long oak table, adorned with gold-rimmed royal bone china and gleaming silver cutlery. Today was a special day, a luncheon celebrating young Prince Louis's outstanding academic achievement. The 8-year-old boy sat between his parents, Prince William and Princess Kate, his face glowing with the innocent joy of a child who had just done exceptionally well on a school test. Louis was talking enthusiastically about his friends, the fascinating history lessons, and how hard he had worked to achieve a perfect score. Kate's face brimmed with pride as she gently stroked her son's hair, while William offered warm smiles, nodding encouragingly from time to time. Opposite them, at the head of the table, sat Queen Camilla, sitting upright. Her meticulously done-up face, however, could not hide the wrinkles of envy and coldness. Her sharp eyes darted across Louis's smile before settling on Kate's glowing face. To Camilla, the rising presence and influence of the Wales family, especially the active involvement of grandmother Carole Middleton in the lives of the young prince and princesses, was a deep thorn in her side. The Middletons, self-made middle-class individuals with no ancestral aristocratic titles, nevertheless enjoyed profound public respect and boundless affection from their grandchildren. Every laugh from the child felt like a stark reminder of the strong ties to the Middleton bloodline, right at the heart of the royal aristocracy, something Camilla had always viewed as an unwelcome intrusion into her royal lineage. As Louis was eagerly describing a landscape painting he had made by hand to gift to his grandfather, King Charles III, smiled gently, preparing to praise his grandson. But at that exact moment, a jarring sound shattered the warm atmosphere of the room. Camilla slammed her silver fork onto her china plate. The force was so abrupt that the fork bounced, clinking against the adjacent crystal glass with a sharp, violent ring. The servants in the room instantly bowed their heads, none daring to draw a breath. The smile faded from Louis's lips. Startled, the boy shrank back, his wide eyes staring in confusion at his step-grandmother, who was glaring back with sheer hostility. Camilla sneered slightly slowly and terrifyingly, dabbing the corner of her mouth with a white silk napkin. She did not bother to look directly at Louis. Instead, she eyed Kate sideways, her voice low, raspy, and heavy with forced authority. A royal family gathering requires solemnity, not a playground for those seeking attention with trivial stories. At this age, a prince should learn to be silent and listen rather than prattling on endlessly about mundane things. Camilla's words were like a bucket of ice water poured over the dining room. William's face darkened instantly. Beneath the table, his hand clenched into a tight fist, the blue veins bulging on the back of his hand. Kate gently placed her hand on her husband's thigh, partly to keep him calm in front of the king, and partly to pull Louis close, wrapping an arm around his shoulder in an instinctive maternal shield. King Charles III frowned slightly, his face showing clear displeasure at his wife's rude behavior, but he merely kept quiet, letting out a very faint sigh and looking away. The king's silence only fueled the subtle triumph in Camilla's eyes. She smugly raised her wine glass, took a small sip, basking in the sense of power that came from extinguishing a child's joy with a single cruel gesture. Following the tense lunch, Louis felt incredibly sad. In his innocent young mind, he couldn't grasp why his step-grandmother disliked him so much. He thought perhaps he had done something wrong and wanted to make amends. Spotting the vibrant red roses blooming in the Windsor Castle rose garden through the window, an idea flashed in the young prince's head. He decided to personally pick a beautiful bouquet of roses as a peace offering for Camilla, hoping the lovely flowers would bring a smile to her face and mend the rift. Louis slipped out to the garden. The ground was still wet and slippery from the previous night's rain. While reaching out to pick a striking red rose from the furthest bush, the boy lost his footing and slid onto the soft mud path. The fall did not hurt him, but dark mud smeared the pristine white outfit Kate had meticulously prepared for him that morning. His knees, the hem of his trousers, and the edge of his white coat were all stained. Nonetheless, Louis did not cry. He quickly stood up, brushed off his hands, and looked down at the bright red bouquet, still perfectly safe in his arms, with hopeful, sparkling eyes. Clutching the flowers tightly, he ran up to the stone balcony at the back of the castle, where he knew Camilla often had her afternoon tea after meals. Stepping onto the stone stairs leading to the windy balcony, Louis saw Camilla's back as she leaned against the balustrade, looking out over the vast courtyard. "Grandmother Camilla!" Louis called out softly and timidly. He approached, holding the deep red bouquet out with both hands, his face smudged with dirt, but his eyes full of sincerity. "I picked these flowers for you. I'm sorry for making you uncomfortable during lunch." Camilla slowly turned around. As her eyes swept from Louis's mud-stained white clothes to the vibrant red bouquet, an expression of utter disgust washed over the queen's face. Entirely unmoved by the child's sweet gesture, Camilla stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the stone floor. She snatched the bouquet violently from Louis's hands, causing sharp thorns to scrape against his small palms. Louis winced in pain, but that physical sting was nothing compared to the cruelty that was about to unfold. Camilla threw the bouquet hard onto the stone balcony floor right in front of him. Not stopping there, she raised her sharp stiletto heel and ruthlessly stomped on the roses. The delicate red petals were crushed under her sole, mixing with the dark dirt smudges that had fallen from Louis. Leaning down close to Louis's face, she hissed venomous words through her teeth, her voice as sharp as a razor. "Look at yourself, filthy and disheveled. This state is the clearest proof of the cheap Middleton blood running through your veins. Your mother, your grandmother, and you, a bunch of commoners playing at royalty, who in the end do nothing but bring mud into this palace. Your presence here only defiles this sacred place." Tears welled up in Louis's eyes, rolling down his muddy cheeks. He stood frozen, staring at the shattered roses crushed beneath Camilla's feet, his ears ringing with the cruel insults of the woman standing before him. The overwhelming fear and psychological trauma made him sob in choked gasps, his small body trembling in the cold wind of the Windsor balcony. Louis's choked, trembling sobs did not just echo on the windy balcony. They carried straight down the corridor leading to the garden. Grandmother Carole Middleton, who was searching for her grandson after noticing his absence, heard that heartbreaking sound. As she rushed out onto the balcony, the sight before her made this iron woman's blood boil. Her beloved grandson, sweet little Prince Louis, stood weeping uncontrollably, his entire body shaking, while Camilla towered over him like a villain, her face boasting clear satisfaction at having trampled on a child's dignity. At their feet, the red rose bouquet lay completely pulverized, crushed, without mercy. Carole Middleton did not hesitate for a second. The instinct of a mother of a grandmother surged stronger than ever. Taking long, decisive strides, she headed straight for Louis. Carole dropped to the cold stone floor, wrapping her strong arms around her grandson's trembling body. She gently stroked Louis's small back, whispering warm, comforting words to soothe him. But when she looked up at Camilla, her eyes blazed with a white-hot fury. Carole Middleton stood straight up, shielding Louis like a wall of steel. She leaned down, scooped up the crushed, muddy remnants of the red roses, and clenched them in her palm as ironclad evidence of the Queen's cruel behavior. Then, in a powerful, resounding voice that shattered the silence of Windsor Castle, she yelled straight into Camilla's face, "Enough!" Carole's shout caught Camilla off guard, forcing her back half a step. But the Queen quickly regained her haughty expression, lifting her chin. "Mrs. Middleton, have you forgotten whom you are speaking to? This is Windsor Castle, and I am the Queen." Carole did not back down. She took another step forward, closing the distance between the two women to less than half a meter. Holding out her clenched fist, filled with the ruined rose petals, right before Camilla's face, Carole's voice trembled with rage, yet remained utterly resolute. "I do not care who you are or what your title is, but these actions, these words of yours to a 7-year-old child, are the most despicable psychological abuse. You crushed his flowers and insulted our family's bloodline just to satisfy your low self-interest and envy. You do not deserve to be this child's grandmother, and you certainly do not deserve any respect." At that moment, William and Kate rushed onto the balcony after hearing the commotion. Seeing Louis sobbing in his grandmother's arms, his white clothes covered in mud, and the roses stomped to pieces at Camilla's feet, Kate felt her heart tighten. She ran over, instantly kneeling to hug Louis, her own tears falling along with her son's. William stepped up beside Carole, standing tall like a steel shield, completely protecting his family from Camilla's toxic presence. William's gaze at Camilla was cold enough to freeze everything around them. He did not utter a single word to her, for the sheer contempt in his eyes spoke far louder than any words. Behind them, at the threshold leading out to the balcony, King Charles III appeared. He had witnessed a portion of this fierce confrontation, and more importantly, he had seen the crushed roses and his grandson's mud-stained clothes. Camilla immediately turned to her husband, her eyes pleading for help, expecting the king to use his power to punish Carole for her insolence. However, King Charles III stood in absolute silence. His face was heavy with disappointment and exhaustion. He did not step forward to defend his wife, nor did he even look at Camilla. The king's prolonged silence served as a silent declaration. He stood entirely with the Middleton family and his children in this conflict. The car ride back to the Wales family residence took place in enveloping silence. Inside the luxury armored vehicle, the air felt thick and heavy. Louis was exhausted from crying, falling asleep in Kate's lap with his head resting on her shoulder, his little body still occasionally jerking with slight tremors. Kate held her son close, her gaze fixed out the car window where trees flashed past under the fading evening light. Grandmother Carole sat opposite them, her hands still tightly gripping a preservation bag containing Louis's mud-stained white clothes and the crushed rose petals, undeniable physical evidence of Camilla's emotional abuse. William sat in the front passenger seat, his face as cold as stone. He didn't turn around during the entire journey, but through the rearview mirror, his eyes constantly watched his wife and son. The anger inside the Prince of Wales had surged past the limits of ordinary endurance. This was no longer about minor family squabbles. This was a direct assault on his son's psychological safety and on the dignity of his beloved wife and her mother's family. William knew that if he did not take decisive action immediately, Camilla would continue to use her position to hurt his children. The moment the car pulled up to the residence, William did not head inside. He turned to his closest security aide, who had served his family for many years. William's voice was low and cold, carrying the absolute weight of an irreversible command. "Starting from this very second, I order the establishment of a strict exclusion zone against Queen Camilla and her entire entourage. Camilla is not permitted to approach Louis George or Charlotte within a 20-meter range under any circumstances. This ban takes effect immediately across all royal residences, public events, or anywhere my children may appear." The security aide was momentarily taken aback, but quickly stood at attention, nodding solemnly. "Understood, Your Royal Highness. But what if the other side deliberately violates this or demands an explanation?" "There will be no explanation," William cut in, his eyes flashing with a cold light. "If she or her people cross that 20-meter line without the direct supervision of myself or Kate, you have the authority to use any necessary security measures to halt them and escort them away immediately." This is my supreme protection order. Communicate this directly to Camilla's security team. Let her know that I am prepared to do whatever it takes to shield my children from her toxicity." William's order spread quickly, sending shockwaves through the royal security apparatus. For a prince to issue an official physical ban against the Queen was entirely unprecedented. It was equivalent to erecting an invisible yet unbreakable steel wall right inside the palace, branding Camilla as a dangerous threat who had to be quarantined from the king's grandchildren. Upon receiving word of the ban from her security chief, Camilla was so furious she smashed the porcelain teacup in her hand. She could not believe William had the audacity to inflict such a public humiliation upon her. Yet deep down, a vague dread began to creep over her. That 20-meter wall was not just keeping her away from the children. It was beginning to isolate her from the royal family entirely. The silence that enveloped Windsor Castle over the next few hours did not bother Queen Camilla at all. On the contrary, she viewed it as the calm before the storm, a storm she was certain would sweep the Middleton family out of this royal world forever. In her opulent bedroom, adorned with valuable hand-woven carpets and antique paintings, Camilla sat before a large mirror, leisurely combing her queenly hair with a jade comb. A cold, smug smile played on her face. To Camilla, the incident on the balcony was not a crime, but a golden opportunity. She prided herself on the belief that even though William and Kate were the Prince and Princess of Wales, they still answered to the king. Most importantly, Carole Middleton was merely a commoner without a title, an outsider who had entered the palace through her daughter's marriage. For a commoner to dare yell directly in the face of the official Queen of the United Kingdom right in the royal sanctuary of Windsor was an unforgivable act of insolence. Camilla was absolutely certain that to defend the honor of the crown, King Charles III would have to deliver a severe punishment targeting the Middletons. She stood up, walked over to her rare mahogany writing desk, and personally selected a sheet of stationery embossed with the Queen's coat of arms in gold leaf. Rather than using direct verbal communication, which could leave traces, Camilla decided to leverage her underground network of connections to corner Kate. Calling her most loyal maid into the room, she handed her a brief but venomous message. It was a covert instruction to her loyal writers at tabloid newspapers, preparing them to leak distorted stories about Mrs. Carole Middleton's rudeness and uncontrolled behavior at Windsor. Camilla wanted to use public opinion to crush Kate's dignity, forcing her to kneel and beg for her mother's forgiveness. She smugly waited for a punitive phone call from the king to Bucklebury Manor, or a decree permanently banning Carole Middleton from all royal events. Every passing moment was a sweet indulgence in her illusion of victory. She imagined the scene of Prince William bowing his head and retracting that ridiculous 20-meter ban when faced with pressure from his father. Envy and blind pride had completely blinded Camilla, preventing her from realizing that King Charles III's silent stance and look of profound disappointment on the balcony the day before was the true death knell for her standing in the royal family. The following morning, at the peaceful Buckleberry Manor of the Middleton family, the telephone rang with a warm tone breaking the silence of the cozy living room. Grandmother Carole Middleton walked over to the round table and gently picked up the antique brass receiver. The voice on the other end was not that of a palace staff member, but the deep, weary, and sorrowful voice of King Charles III himself. "Carole, it is I, the king," spoke his voice so soft it sounded like a sigh devoid of a monarch's usual authority or distance. "I am calling first and foremost to offer my most sincere apologies to you and your family. What happened yesterday at Windsor to Louis is an inexcusable mistake. I witnessed it all, and my heart aches deeply over the hurt caused to him." Carole Middleton smiled gently, her shoulders relaxing, though her voice remained steady and firm with the strength of an iron mother. "Your Majesty, I appreciate your call, but as a grandmother, I could not stand by and watch my grandson be emotionally abused and our family bloodline insulted before my eyes. I did what any grandmother must do to protect her child, regardless of who stood before me." "I understand, Carole. You did absolutely the right thing. King Charles sighed softly, his voice heavy with helplessness and shame. Your action to protect your grandson was entirely justified. I should have been the one to step in and stop it from the very beginning. I am deeply sorry for letting things go this far. Please convey my warmest thoughts to Louis and assure him that he is always safe and loved at Buckleberry. After hanging up, King Charles III stood quietly in his private study for a long time. His face was deeply lined with profound disappointment. He remembered the image of the rose bouquet crushed beneath Camilla's heel and the fearful tears of his innocent grandson. This was not just violence against a child. It was a brutal trampling of the core family values he had always cherished. His tolerance for Camilla's envious schemes over the years had officially reached its breaking point. Taking slow but incredibly firm steps, he made his way toward the Queen's private apartments. Inside her splendid drawing room, Camilla stood by the window, a bone china teacup in hand, her face lighting up with anticipation as she saw her husband enter. She immediately set her teacup down and stepped forward with a smug smile, fully convinced the king had come to share news of the Middletons' punishment. Charles, did you call the Middletons? Have you taught that rude woman a proper lesson? King Charles III stopped a few paces away from Camilla. He did not come any closer. The physical distance between them at that moment felt like an invisible abyss. The king looked at his wife with eyes so cold, vacant, and filled with deep disappointment that the smile on Camilla's face froze instantly. I did just call Carole Middleton, Charles said coldly, each word striking like stone on a freezing floor. But not to punish her. I called to apologize to her for your cruel, despicable behavior toward my grandson. Camilla's eyes widened, her face contorting with shock and fury. What, you apologized to that commoner woman? She screamed at your queen, right in the middle of the palace. She screamed at a child abuser. Charles interrupted loudly, his voice trembling with rage, completely drowning out Camilla's protest. You trampled a 7-year-old child's bouquet and insulted his family's bloodline just to satisfy your wretched envy. Do you have any idea how wretched and wicked you looked on that balcony yesterday? I have quietly endured many things for you, Camilla. But psychologically abusing an innocent child inside my own family is a boundary you must absolutely never cross. Camilla stammered, trying to step forward to grasp her husband's hand. Charles, let me explain. The boy got his clothes dirty. But King Charles III would hear no more. He firmly brushed her hand away and took a step back. He looked at Camilla one last time, a gaze with no love, no sympathy, only utter contempt. The king turned and walked away, his coat rustling with his swift, decisive movements, leaving Camilla standing entirely alone in the cavernous room. The heavy wooden door shut tight behind the king, officially commencing a period of absolute isolation for Queen Camilla within her very own palace. In the days that followed, the ancient and grand Windsor castle suddenly became a tomb, confining Queen Camilla's absolute solitude. Prince William's 20-meter ban was enforced meticulously and strictly by his private security team. Whenever Camilla was about to leave her quarters, security personnel carefully verified the location of the 3 Wales children to ensure no accidental contact could occur. One afternoon, as Camilla was leisurely walking down the castle's antique portrait gallery, she spotted George and Charlotte walking with their nanny in the distance. Instinctively, she moved forward to assert her royal authority. Immediately, however, 2 of William's tall security guards stepped up, forming a solid human wall right in front of the Queen. Apologies, Your Majesty. Prince Louis and the young princes are ahead. Please keep your distance in accordance with the protection order, the guard said in a cold tone, completely unyielding. Camilla turned pale with humiliation in front of the servants. She turned back in a rage, realizing her royal power was utterly useless against William's strict defensive wall. The most brutal punishment for Camilla was not formal decrees or public penalties, but absolute social and emotional isolation within her very own home. King Charles III completely ignored his wife's presence. They no longer dined together and no longer shared evening conversations by the fireplace. When forced to appear together at certain mandatory events, the king treated Camilla with cold detachment, never meeting her gaze or showing any gesture of intimacy. The palace staff and servants quickly caught on to the shift. They served Camilla in terrifying silence with no one chatting or smiling around her beyond minimal duties. Camilla walked through the long corridors of Windsor like a lonely shadow imprisoned by her own envy and cruelty. Her every footstep now echoed with empty solitude, a devastating psychological punishment for the woman who had ruthlessly trampled a child's soul. In stark contrast to the suffocating and freezing air of Windsor, the Middleton family's Bucklebury Manor was filled with warm sunshine and cheerful laughter. After the storm had passed, Prince Louis had quickly returned to a happy life, entirely safe among those who truly loved him. On the lush green lawn of the vast Buckleberry garden, Louis was running around excitedly with the family dog. He wore a comfortable tracksuit, his face bright and his eyes sparkling with his natural, innocent joy. Kate sat on a wooden bench in the shade of a large oak tree, her eyes watching her son's every stride with gentle devotion. Beside her, grandmother Carole Middleton was peeling an orange, a warm smile gracing the face of the Iron Woman who had just triumphed in protecting her family. William walked out of the house carrying 2 glasses of chilled fruit juice. He handed one to Kate and sat down beside her, gently taking his wife's hand. Watching Louis laugh and play in the distance, both understood they had to make extremely difficult and tough decisions to safeguard this peace. But seeing their son's smile, they knew every sacrifice, every confrontation had been completely worth it. Louis picked up a ball and ran toward his grandparents, and parents grinning from ear to ear. "Daddy, Mommy, watch me throw this!" The child's laughter echoed across the Buckleberry garden, completely sweeping away the dark memories of that afternoon on the Windsor balcony. Here, there were no cold royal titles, nor any wretched envious schemes. There was only genuine love and the protective embrace of family, the most peaceful sanctuary that no power or title could ever reach or destroy. Do you feel a sense of triumph at the silent punishment King Charles III bestowed upon Camilla? Is cold isolation within the 4 walls of Windsor Castle the most fitting punishment for someone who ruthlessly psychologically abused an 8-year-old child? Or does she deserve to suffer a more public and devastating consequence? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.